Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of ELA with Mr. Wells. I know it's been a few days since we've had one of these videos. I hope you haven't abandoned me and gone off to some other YouTube sensation. I have a live audience today, by the way. We've got some people in the classroom working on homework today, so they're going to hear this as well today. But today, we've been talking about close reading, and we're going to be continuing with our unit on close reading. Remember, close reading is when you read something to really analyze and understand it. And we've been looking at signposts. In close reading, we look for signposts. Signposts are clues that the author gives you that tell you something about what it is that you are supposed to be understanding, a clue that about what the author is trying to tell you about what he or she has written. Well, today for our signpost, we're going to do again and again. And in your notes somewhere, whether it's on the story or in a Google Doc, wherever you have been writing these things down, you're going to write the signpost again and again. The signpost is called again and again. And the definition of again and again is whenever a word, situation, object, or phrase keeps happening over and over. So whenever a word, situation, object, or phrase keeps happening over and over, we call that again and again. And so that is the signpost for today. That's the definition. I want you to write that down. But just like the other signposts, whenever we see it, we're going to ask ourselves a question. We're going to stop and ask ourselves a question. And the question that we want to ask ourselves is, why does this keep happening? Why does this keep happening? Okay, so what you'll do is I've attached here on Google Classroom, I attached part of this book called The Hatchet by Gary Paulsen, and you'll get that out and hopefully be able to read along with me as we're reading along. This is about a boy whose parents are separated. He's going to visit his dad in Alaska, and he ends up crashing a plane, and he ends up sort of trapped in the wilderness. But this is the first part of the book here, where it's just talking about the plane ride in the wilderness. And we're going to read it together. And as we're reading it, I want you to just be on the lookout for again and again. Okay, remember, and again is where a word, situation, object, or phrase happens over and over. Word, situation, object, or phrase happens over and over. So let's read it together. Brian Robison stared out the window of the small plane at the endless green northern wilderness below. It was a small plane, a Cessna 406, a bush plane, and the engine was so loud, so roaring and consuming and loud, that it ruined any chance for conversation. Not that he had much to say. He was 13 and the only passenger on the plane, with a pilot named, what was it, Jim or Jake or something, who was in his mid-40s and who had been silent as he worked to prepare for takeoff. In fact, since Brian had come to the small airport in Hampton, New York, to meet the plane, driven by his mother, the pilot had spoken only 5 words to him: get in the co-pilot's seat, which Brian had done. They had taken off, and that was the last of the conversation. There had been the initial excitement, of course. He had never flown in a single-engine plane before, and to be sitting in the co-pilot's seat with all the controls right there in front of him, all the instruments in his face as the plane clawed for altitude, jerking and sliding on the wind currents as the pilot took off, had been interesting and exciting. Now Brian sat, looking out the window with the roar thundering through his ears, and tried to catalog. He had never flown in a single-engine plane before, and to be sitting in the co-pilot's seat with all the controls right there in front of him, all the instruments in his face as the plane clawed for altitude, jerking and sliding on the wind currents as the pilot took off, had been interesting and exciting. Now Brian sat looking out the window with a roar thundering through his ears, and tried to catalog what had led up to his taking this flight. The thinking started. Always it started with a single word: Divorce. It was an ugly word, he thought, a tearing, ugly word that meant fights and yelling. Lawyers. God, he thought, how he hated lawyers who sat with their comfortable smiles and tried to explain to him in legal terms how all that he lived in was coming apart, and the breaking and shattering of all the solid things. His home, his life, all the solid things. Divorce, a breaking word, an ugly breaking word. All right, so you're going to have your notice and note log here, and you remember this one. You're going to list the location. Now, when we're talking about location, I want you to remember that we're talking about where it is on the page. So, like page 1, section 1, paragraph 1, something like that. And don't get too hung up on making that exact, because the whole idea behind that is just so I can see where it is in the story if I have to look it up. But the second column here is going to be the signpost you noticed. The signpost you noticed is going to be again and again, again and again. Okay, so that's the signpost. You're going to put that in the second column. And the third one, you're going to put the signpost you found. Now, what is the word, object, phrase, situation that occurs over and over? Probably you said divorce. And if that's the case, you're correct. Now, you could have said something like all the solid things. He repeats that too, but it all goes into that same idea of divorce. And he repeats it because he is, he's trying to make a point here about what Brian is thinking. Remember, when we see again and again, we want to ask ourselves, why does this keep happening? Why does this keep happening? So in your notes somewhere, you're going to put divorce, and then you're going to answer the question as best you can why you think this keeps happening. Well, what do you think? Well, there could be many different reasons, maybe. But if you think about it, maybe it is the thing that is on his mind the most. His relationship between his parents, their divorce, affects his attitude, it affects his actions. It's going to maybe affect everything about him in the story. Maybe it becomes a recurring theme later on in the story. We don't know for sure. But those are all possibilities, and so they're possible answers to the question, why does this keep happening? So try to answer that question then in your own words there. Now let's go on to the second section here. Let's read it with me. Second page, the second section. Divorce. Secrets. No, not secrets so much as just the secret. What he knew and had not told anybody. What he knew about his mother that had caused the divorce. What he knew. The secret. The divorce, the secret. Okay, so what's the again and again here? Now, we're not going to do divorce again because we already did divorce. So what is it? Right, it's the secret. The secret. So you're going to put the location, page 2, section 2, and then you're going to put the signpost you noticed, which is again and again. Remember, again and again is when a word, situation, object, or phrase repeats itself over and over. And in the notes about it, my notes about it, you're going to put the secret. The secret. And then you're going to ask yourself the question, why does this keep happening? Why does this keep happening? What about the secret is important that the author wants you to know? Well, it could be, it could be more than one thing. In some ways, this is an opinion question. Okay. Now, not all opinions are valid here. You know, if you tell me if it's something in your notes about, well, maybe Brian thinks that he's going to be abducted by aliens from outer space. Well, that has nothing to do with the story, so you can't put that. But maybe you're thinking to yourself, well, you know, the secret, whatever he knows about his mom and his dad, maybe it'll affect his relationship with his mom and dad. Maybe he'll have to make some decision about it. Maybe he's going to have to tell the secret. I don't know about you, but have you ever had a secret that you knew about and nobody else knew about, and it was a really serious secret? How does that make you feel? Well, kind of weighs you down, doesn't it? And so any one of these things you could be putting that about why this keeps happening again. Okay, Let's look at the third section here, and as we're looking at it, see if you can find the again and again. Brian felt his eyes beginning to burn and knew there would be tears. He had cried for a time, but that was gone now. He didn't cry now. The pilot sat large, his hands lightly on the wheel, feet on the rudder pedals. He seemed more a machine than a man, an extension of the plane. When he saw Brian look at him, the pilot seemed to open up a bit and smiled. Ever fly in the co-pilot's seat before? He leaned over and lifted the headset off his right ear and put it on his temple, yelling to overcome the sound of the engine. Brian shook his head. It's not as complicated as it looks. Good plane like this almost flies itself. The pilot shrugged. Makes my job easy. He took Brian's left arm. Here, put your hands on the controls, your feet on the rudder pedals, and I'll show you what I mean. Brian shook his head. I'd better not. Sure, try it. Brian reached out and took the wheel in a grip so tight his knuckles were white. He pushed his feet down on the pedals. The plane slewed suddenly to the right. Not so hard. Take her light. Take her light. Brian eased off, relaxed his grip. The burning in his eyes was forgotten momentarily as the vibration of the plane came through the wheel and the pedals. It seemed almost alive. See, the pilot let go of his wheel, raised his hands in the air, and took his feet off the pedals to show Brian he was actually flying the plane alone. Simple. Now turn the wheel a little to the right and push on the right rudder pedal a small amount. Brian turned the wheel slightly, and the plane immediately banked to the right, and when he pressed on the right rudder pedal, the nose slid across the horizon on the right. He left off on the pressure and straightened the wheel, and the plane righted itself. Now you can turn. Bring her back to the left a little. Brian turned the wheel left, pushed on the left pedal, and the plane came back around. It's easy, he smiled, at least this part. The pilot nodded. All of flying is easy. Just takes learning. Like everything else, like everything else. He took the controls back and then reached up and rubbed his left shoulder. Aches and pains, must be getting old. Brian let go of the controls and moved his feet away from the pedals as the pilot put his hands on the wheel. Thank you. But the pilot had put his headset back on, and gratitude was lost in the engine noise, and things went back to Brian looking out the window at the ocean of trees and lakes. The burning eyes did not come back, but memories did, came flooding in. The words, always the words. Divorce, the secret, fights, split, the big split. Brian's father did not understand as Brian did, knew only that Brian's mother wanted to break the marriage apart. The split had come, and then the divorce, all so fast, and the court had left him with his mother, except for Summers and what the judge called visitation rights. So formal. All right, so that's the end of the story. What I want you to do is I want you to see if you can come up with a two, actually. There's more than two in here, but two again and agains in here. So I want you to come up with two again and agains, put the location, put again and again in the second column for your signpost, and then in your notes about it, tell what it is, and then say something about what you think about why this keeps happening. Remember, what I'm looking for when I read that part is I'm looking to see whether or not you're really thinking and understanding the story that you're reading. Okay, so that's the first part of your assignment. Now, the second part is you're going to do this. You're going to do this again with another story, but instead of a written story, this time it's a visual story. I've attached a link to a short cartoon called Destiny. It's a really neat short film by Pixar. And when you watch the first time, and you may have to watch it more than once to really get a good idea of what's going on. When you watch it the first time, it can seem really strange. But I want you to identify two again and again moments there, two again and again moments. Put them on your log there, right under the ones that we've already done. So we did two in class, and you're going to do two more on your own from the Hatchet, and then you're going to do two from Destiny. So that makes a total of 6 entries that you're going to have there. And when you watch Destiny, I want you to make those entries, and I really want you to focus in your notes about it on why you think this keeps happening. What's the author, or in this case, the filmmaker, cartoonist, really trying to say? Okay, so have a good time. If you have any questions, please let me know. You can email me or send me a message on Google Classroom. And otherwise, be sure to hit like and subscribe here on YouTube, and make sure you have your notifications turned on so you can see all my cool videos. Talk to you later.